Okay, big box. Stop!
This is a CBS News special report. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good day. U.S. military forces have suffered some casualties during the invasion today of the small Caribbean island nation of Grenada. It is not known how many Americans were killed or wounded on Grenada. President Reagan said that the invasion by U.S. Marines and U.S. Army Rangers, plus a token force from 6 Caribbean nations, was necessary, as the president said, to protect Americans and to restore democracy to Grenada. What Washington considered to be the far-left military in Grenada seized power last week and murdered the country's Marxist prime minister, as well as some other top officials. As many as 1,000 U.S. Army Rangers and 500 Marines were involved in today's invasion, and there apparently was also a parachute drop by U.S. forces. Our Pentagon correspondent, David Martin, has just left a Defense Department briefing and is in Washington. David, we are having some transmission difficulty, but we do want to know what came out of that briefing.
Well, let's deal first with the casualties, Dan. They were described by this senior defense official, who would speak only on background, not for attribution, as minimal. And we asked the question again and again the answer came back minimal. He confirmed that one American helicopter is down, but he did not confirm that it had gone down from enemy fire or from Grenadian fire, or whether it had gone down for mechanical reasons. However, he did confirm that the U.S. forces are taking some small arms fire. Now, the U.S. forces have landed in 2 places, and if I can show you on the map where, there are a total of 1,900 American soldiers, Marines and Army Rangers. The Marines have landed at Pearls Airport here in the north, and they are responsible for securing the northern half of the island. The U.S. Army Rangers from Fort Lewis, Washington, and Fort Stewart, Georgia, have landed at Salinas Airfield down here. Some of them went in a parachute drop. Others were landed at the airfield after the airfield was secured. They are responsible for the southern half of the island. The medical school at St. George's, where most of the American citizens in Grenada live, has been secured. However, that still leaves several hundred Americans who are retirees and who live and work in Grenada about the island, and we do not know what their status is, whether they have, for instance, been taken hostages. There is, as yet, no evacuation of any Americans on the island.
David, sorry to interrupt, but if we could go back to a wide shot of the island map, and I want to emphasize to you, we're having some transmission difficulties, and it's a little hard for us to see. If you would point to St. George's on the map, that's where the American school is. It's on the west coast of the island, about a third of the way up.
St. George's is here.
All right. That's where the American school, the medical school, is located, is it not?
Yes.
We just wanted to make that clear because we were talking about a third place on the island. There are 3 basic locations if one wants to talk about the military operation. St. George's, which is the largest concentration of population on the island, is one. Now let's move down to the southern part of the island. This is the smaller airstrip. That's where the airdrop by U.S. Rangers was it not?
Yes, but this, Dan, this is the larger airstrip. This is the one that President Reagan has shown overhead photos of, the one that is being lengthened to a length of 10,000 feet.
All right, and that's where the, so far as we know, that's where the Cubans were.
That's right. There are about 500 Cuban construction workers there, plus a much smaller but not specified number of Cuban military advisors. The Grenadian army numbers about 1,200, and then they have a militia which was called up over the weekend, which numbers someplace between 1,000 and 5,000, depending on how many they were able to call up. It is not known, or at least it is not being told to us, whether it is Cuban units who are firing on the Americans or whether it is Grenadian units.
Now, David, the one other place where there was some action is on the east coast of the island. If we could go back to the map of the island, this is where the smaller airport is.
That's right.
And this was secured primarily by a Marine seaborne assault. Is that our understanding?
No, Marines by helicopter. They came from the helicopter carrier Guam, and they went in there by helicopter and secured the airfield.
Now, David, it's very difficult, I think, to get some idea of two things. One, where this island is located, and two, the distances, the size of the island and the distances involved. So first, let's point out that the island is much closer to Venezuela and South America than it is to the United States. Now, the overall size of the island in terms of area is about 130 square miles. It'd be roughly the size, geographically, of the city of Philadelphia. It has about 110,000 people. That make it, on the whole island, that'd be about the size of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Now, do you know the distances involved here? Roughly how far is it from St. George's down to the larger airport where the Cubans were?
Well, we have a scale on this map, and that is 2 miles there. So if I were to lay that on here, it looks like about 2 miles between St. George's and the airport.
All right, St. George's and the airport where the U.S. Rangers made an airdrop, a parachute assault, and about how far would it be from St. George's across the island to the other airstrip where the Marines made their helicopter assault?
Well, let's just quickly go across 2, 4, 6, maybe 8 to 10 miles.
Which gives us some aid in getting in context just how small this island is. That while it may look large on that map, that it is indeed a tiny island. Anything else about the casualties? Any word from that Pentagon briefing from which you've just come about Cuban casualties or possible Soviet casualties?
No, there was considerable discussion of the status of the 30 Soviet military advisors, because I believe there have been reports that the Soviet military advisors, the 30 advisors, had been captured. That was specifically denied. The briefer said that the Soviet personnel are not in our custody. They are being treated as third country nationals. They are free to leave as they wish. It was not clear that the Cubans are in our custody. All that was said there was that we hope that the Cuban construction workers leave as a group, and then it was pointed out that there is a Cuban ship in the harbor at St. George's here, and obviously the aim is to load them on that ship.
David, so far as we know, the casualties that were mentioned among Americans were casualties involving U.S. military people. Was there any word of casualties of American civilians on the island?
The question was asked, and there was no answer.
So here's what we know, or what we're told by the Pentagon, that there were some American military casualties. How many and the extent to which we took casualties is unknown. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're described repeatedly as minimal.
One helicopter was hit and down. We have no other details on that.
No, one helicopter went down. They are not sure whether or not it went down as a result of being fired on.
The Cubans, we are not certain whether any Cubans were wounded or killed.
That's right.
We are not certain whether any Soviet advisors or Soviet nationals were hit or killed.
That's right, and no reports that they were.
At last report, were the American forces taking any gunfire anywhere?
Yes, they were taking small arms fire, but it was not made clear whether the small arms fire was occurring up here at Pearls or down here at Salinas.
And the Army troops came from Fort Lewis in Washington and Fort Stewart in Georgia.
That's right.
And the Marines were those Marines who left Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, a week or 10 days ago, maybe less than that, originally headed for Beirut, but diverted to this area for this assault.
That's right, and there are a total of 1,900 Marines. Only a small portion of them, or say half of them, have been put on the island now, so there are reinforcements both for the Marines and for the Rangers at bases in the United States.
David, we want to go to Bill Plant, our White House correspondent, but if you'll stand by there at the Defense Department. Bill, the White House has been following what's happening on Grenada, obviously. Also, they've been charting reaction. What's your assessment of the overall reaction they've been getting from Capitol Hill, the American public, and from on Grenada itself?
Dan, as you know, there were congressional leaders in here last night and again early this morning to be briefed on this operation. The reports coming out of that vary a little bit. The chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Percy of Illinois, did say that there was no great congressional objection. But we have also heard that Speaker O'Neill may in fact have had more than a few objections. So I think the reaction from Capitol Hill is going to build as the day goes on. I want to note, Dan, that we did hear the president a little earlier this morning when cameras were in the Oval Office taking photographs, respond to a question about casualties. He said that there had been casualties. I know there are casualties, he said, but I don't have any official report right now. Now, of course, we don't know for certain whether he meant U.S. casualties or not. What's going on behind me at the moment is the regular daily White House press briefing with Deputy Press Secretary Larry Speaks, who is running over the events of last night and earlier this morning. So far, nothing new. Dan?
Bill, I noticed that Speaks has a map up to his left. I assume that that's a map of Grenada, and he's explaining basically what we've been told at the Pentagon.
That's correct, Dan. That's the same map that was used here in an earlier briefing by the Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs.
Bill, recapitulating what the president said when he first appeared this morning and officially announced this, why have we invaded Grenada?
The president gave 3 reasons for the invasion of Grenada or for the U.S. support of that action. They were to protect American citizens, to facilitate the evacuation of those who wanted to leave, and to restore law and order. Now, there's been some dispute over just exactly how much there has been, how much reason there has been to be concerned for the safety of the Americans on the island. The Deputy or Assistant Secretary of State, who was in here earlier, claims that they were concerned about possible terrorist actions. They said that those 600 medical students could be a target for hostage taking. But we had reports much earlier this morning that the dean of the medical school down there didn't believe that there was all that much of a problem.
Bill, personally and frankly, I don't believe this myself, but the question is being asked, people telephoning into our studios, and my question to you is this question being asked at the White House, is whether in any way the timing of this invasion of Grenada was timed to, in effect, knock the sad news from Beirut of 207 U.S. military people killed there into off the front page.
And let me just tell you this. We were told this morning that this action in Grenada has been in the planning stage for well over a week. Certainly since the takeover or the elimination of the previous government on the island of Grenada, which was on October 12th, more than a week ago. So if this has been in the planning stages for that long, that probably doesn't have anything to do with the timing of what happened in Beirut. However, we do know that the final go-ahead was given at a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff by the President yesterday.
So that would tend to put down any thought that this was suddenly conjured up as something to take the heat off of public opinion in Beirut. Clearly, if it's been in the planning stages for a week or 10 days, that it wasn't something that suddenly came up and the military said, we want to go in, and the president said, yes, go in.
It looks that way, Dan.
Thank you, Bill Plant. If you'll continue to stand by, as David Martin is at the Pentagon right now, we want to point out that we monitored just a short time ago an English-language broadcast by Moscow Radio giving the Soviet version of what happened this morning on Grenada.
Using concocted pretexts, the Reagan administration sent over 20 warships to Grenada's shores. Speaking in Washington on the subject, the president cynically said that the goal was to demonstrate the determination of the United States to defend its so-called backyard and not to permit, as you said, communist presence in the Western Hemisphere. In this way, Washington is indicating that Grenada is only the first target of United States armed intervention in the affairs of countries in the Caribbean and in Central America, whose policies don't suit the United States.
That was Radio Moscow, as monitored a short while ago. Reviewing quickly, U.S. military forces, along with a token force representing other Caribbean nations, have invaded the small island of Grenada. The U.S. forces have taken some casualties, the extent of which is not yet clear. One U.S. helicopter was downed. Whether it was downed by fire or not is unclear. U.S. Army Rangers from Fort Lewis, Washington and Fort Stewart, Georgia, made an airdrop. About 700 or 1,000 U.S. parachutists made an airdrop at the southern tip of the island of Grenada. U.S. Marines moving by helicopter made a landing on the east coast of Grenada, both of those to secure the airports in those locations. The other military action was centered around St. George's and the the school at St. George's, where many Americans attend school, many of them medical students. No casualties have been confirmed among Cubans or Soviets on the island. CBS News will continue to monitor the fast-moving developments in and around Grenada and report them as warranted through the day. We also will be monitoring developments in Beirut, where the death toll of U.S. military men now has reached 207. We'll have full details on both of these stories and all other news on the CBS Evening News. For now, Dan Rather, CBS News, New York.
This has been a CBS News special report.
Now let's return to the program Press Your Luck.